What is the extraordinary form of the Mass?
In previous videos, we've talked about the different rites of the Church, the different forms according to which different groups of Catholics celebrate the sacraments and exercise church discipline. In the Latin rite of the Church, there are a number of sub-rites, and these include things like the Ambrosian rite, which is found in Milan, Italy, and the Mozarabic rite, which is found at various locations in Spain. These rites are very similar to the way the liturgy was celebrated through much of Europe in the centuries after Latin became the dominant liturgical language. In 1570, Pope Pius V issued an edition of the Roman Missal, the book that's used in celebrating the Mass, that standardized the liturgy for much of Europe, although it did allow these minor rites to continue to exist, and it didn't touch the Eastern rites at all. Over the next few centuries, various popes made minor modifications to this missal, and the last major modification, which really was actually quite small, was made by Pope John XXIII in 1962. Then came the Second Vatican Council, which advocated a more thoroughgoing revision of the liturgy, and that resulted in a new edition of the Roman Missal that came out in 1969, and that was revised in 1970, and again, more recently, by John Paul II. The new editions of the Roman Missal, the 69, 75, and John Paul II editions, have been used overwhelmingly in the Latin rite of the Catholic Church for the last 40 years, and they are part of what is now referred to as the ordinary form of the Roman rite, the way that the different sacraments, and especially the Mass, are ordinarily celebrated in the Latin rite of the Church. But the 1962 edition of the Roman Missal, the last one before the Second Vatican Council, is still in use. It's not the ordinary way liturgy is celebrated in the Latin rite of the Church, but it is still used, and so these days it's part of what's called the extraordinary form of the Roman rite. Not the ordinary way things are celebrated, but a way that's still possible and is often used in special circumstances. Many people were opposed to it when Pope Benedict issued his motu proprio, that's an apostolic letter issued on the Pope's initiative, called Summorum Pontificum in 2007, in which he gave priests all over the world, at least in the Latin rite of the Church, to celebrate the liturgy according to the 1962 Missal without requiring any special permission. He also advocated a very generous celebration of this so that the aspirations of the faithful who were attracted to and who appreciated this form of Mass could be guaranteed. This displeased a lot of people, however, because of the identity politics that had cropped up in the years since the Second Vatican Council. Some tried to portray this as a repudiation of the Second Vatican Council's desires for the liturgy. Some argued it was a step backwards and that it was a regressive move. Well, Pope Benedict addressed this question in a letter that he issued accompanying Summorum Pontificum. In that letter, he said, "There is no contradiction between the two editions of the Roman Missal. In the history of the liturgy, there is growth and progress, but no rupture. What earlier generations held as sacred remains sacred and great for us too, and it cannot be all of a sudden entirely forbidden or even considered harmful. It behooves all of us to preserve the riches which have developed in the Church's faith and prayer and to give them their proper place." It's hard to argue with this position. The older form of Mass was sacred and is sacred, and so is the new. These two forms of Mass can exist side by side. They don't have to compete. They don't have to be bound up in identity politics. And they both have a future. In fact, Pope Benedict has indicated that there can be changes in the 1962 Missal. It doesn't have to remain frozen in the year 1962. The extraordinary rite can have new editions of the Missal come out that make changes. And in fact, he himself revised a prayer that's used on Good Friday in the extraordinary form of the liturgy. He's also mentioned the possibility of adding new saints and new propers of the Mass to the extraordinary form Missal. And so both of these rites, existing side by side and stepping aside from the identity politics, have the ability to preserve and enrich the Church's liturgical heritage.